Before we begin, subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you're ready to step into a case so dark, so disturbing, it refuses to let go once you hear it. The call came in just after dawn, the kind that makes dispatches lower their voices without realizing it. A small roadside motel sat half awake under a gray winter sky, its neon sign flickering like it had something to hide. Room 217. No forced entry, no sounds reported overnight, just a child who wouldn't wake up. When officers pushed open the door, the air inside felt wrong, stale, heavy, charged with something unspeakable. Toys were scattered near the bed, untouched, as if playtime had stopped abruptly. The curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the morning light, and in the center of the room lay the still form of a 3-year-old girl. No movement, no sound, just silence where life should have been. Paramedics arrived fast, but it didn't take long. The child was pronounced dead at the scene. Even before the coroner arrived, hardened officers exchanged looks they'd hoped never to share again. Something about this wasn't accidental. It wasn't sudden illness. It felt deliberate. Investigators began documenting every inch of the room. The motel was cheap, temporary, the kind of place people stayed when they didn't want to be found or didn't know where else to go. A duffel bag sat open near the door. Fast food wrappers overflowed from a trash can. On the nightstand, a cracked phone buzzed with missed calls no one had answered. 2 adults were present when police arrived, the child's father and his girlfriend. They sat on opposite sides of the room, avoiding each other's eyes. The father stared at the floor, jaw clenched, his leg bouncing uncontrollably. The girlfriend's hands shook as she wrapped her arms around herself, whispering the same words over and over. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Detectives separated them immediately. The father claimed the night had been normal. The child had been difficult, he said, refusing to sleep, throwing tantrums. He insisted she was put to bed alive. When he woke up, she was unresponsive. An accident, a tragic accident. But the room told a different story. Investigators noticed faint marks that raised immediate concern. Not injuries you'd expect from a fall or sudden medical event. Something restrained, something controlled. The kind of detail that makes your stomach drop when you realize you're not looking at a tragedy, you're looking at a crime. Then came the girlfriend's statement. Her voice cracked as she spoke, eyes fixed on the interrogation table. She described a night filled with tension, frustration, and discipline that went too far. She hesitated, stopped, then said something that froze the room. She claimed the child had been punished physically. She said the father lost his temper, and at one point, she alleged, he struck the child harder than he intended. Detectives leaned in. This was no longer a welfare check. It was a homicide investigation. As crime scene techs continued their sweep, one officer opened a bag tucked beneath the bed. Inside were items that shouldn't have been anywhere near a child. The kind of evidence that doesn't just suggest abuse, it confirms intent. And that's when investigators realized this case wasn't just about what happened in that motel room. It was about how long it had been happening and who knew. By midday, the motel parking lot was sealed off with yellow tape snapping in the cold wind. Word spread fast, too fast. Guests peered through cracked doors, phones raised, whispers multiplying as law enforcement vehicles crowded the lot. Inside room 217, investigators moved with quiet urgency, aware that every minute lost could mean a truth buried forever. At the station, the father and girlfriend were questioned separately. Detectives knew better than to rush. Pressure makes people retreat, but patience makes them talk. The father stuck to his story at first. He described himself as exhausted, overwhelmed, a parent at the end of his rope. He insisted the motel stay was temporary, just a rough patch, insisting he loved his daughter. But his timeline didn't line up. He claimed he checked on her during the night, yet security footage told a certain story. Cameras showed him leaving the room for long stretches, pacing the balcony, lighting cigarette after cigarette like he was trying to outrun something inside his head. Meanwhile, the girlfriend was unraveling. She began correcting herself mid-sentence, contradicting earlier statements. Her story shifted from denial to justification, then to something closer to fear. She described the father's temper, how it could flip without warning. She admitted she'd stayed silent before, that she'd watched things happen she didn't agree with, telling herself it wasn't her place, that it would stop.
It hadn't. Detectives began pulling records, child welfare reports, missed medical appointments, old calls that never turned into cases. The picture forming was ugly and familiar. A child slipping through cracks widened by excuses, by silence, by adults choosing themselves over responsibility. Then came the forensic update. The injuries confirmed what investigators already feared. This was not a sudden event, it was a buildup, a pattern. Evidence suggested the child had been restrained at some point before her death. That detail changed everything. Accidents don't involve preparation. Accidents don't leave behind systems. Armed with this information, detectives returned to the father. This time they didn't accuse, they empathized. They let the room grow quiet, and in that silence, he began to talk. He admitted the night had gotten out of control. He said the child wouldn't listen, that he was trying to scare her into behaving. He insisted he never meant to hurt her, that he thought she'd calm down, that he thought she'd wake up. But when detectives asked why he didn't call for help immediately, his answer was chilling. He said he was afraid. Afraid of what he'd done, or afraid of being caught. As the hours passed, pressure mounted outside the interrogation rooms. Prosecutors reviewed charges, officers retraced timelines, evidence bags filled with details no child should ever be associated with. Then, just as investigators believed they had the full story, a final report landed on the table. Toxicology results, not from the child, but from the room. Substances were present, enough to cloud judgment, enough to explain the erratic behavior, enough to raise a terrifying possibility that the adults responsible weren't just overwhelmed, they were impaired. Detectives exchanged looks. This wasn't just abuse, it was neglect layered on cruelty, fueled by decisions that erased any margin for safety. And as arrest paperwork was prepared, one investigator noticed something no one had questioned yet. A time-stamped message on the father's phone, sent hours before the child was found unresponsive. A message that suggested he knew something was terribly wrong long before anyone else did. And that meant the truth was still incomplete. The arrests came quietly. No press conference, no flashing lights, just handcuffs clicking shut as the weight of what had happened finally caught up with the two people who should have protected her most. Outside the station, the sky darkened early, as if the day itself wanted to end. Prosecutors laid out the case piece by piece, the timeline, the injuries, the contradictions. The message on the father's phone became a turning point. Sent hours before the 911 call, it was short, panicked, and damning. An admission that something had gone wrong long before help was ever requested. Not a plea for medical advice, not a call for emergency services, just fear of consequences. That delay told investigators everything they needed to know. In court filings, the language was cold and clinical, but the meaning was devastating. The child had suffered, not in a single moment, but over time. Discipline blurred into cruelty, control replaced care. And when the adults realized the situation had spiraled beyond repair, they chose silence over help. The girlfriend's cooperation came too late to change the outcome. She tried to reposition herself as a witness rather than a participant, but prosecutors didn't see it that way. Knowing and allowing can be as powerful as doing, especially when the victim is 3 years old and completely defenseless. As the case moved forward, more details surfaced. Neighbors recalled hearing crying on previous nights. Motel staff remembered complaints that were brushed off. Small moments that in hindsight screamed warning, but at the time felt easy to ignore. That's how these cases survive, not through secrecy, but through indifference. The courtroom filled during the first hearing. Strangers sat shoulder to shoulder, drawn by the need to understand how something like this could happen in plain sight. The father stood motionless as charges were read, his expression empty, as if the reality hadn't fully landed. The girlfriend cried openly, her hands covering her face, but the tears changed nothing. No plea could undo the damage. No sentence could restore what was lost. What haunted investigators most wasn't just the evidence, it was the normalcy surrounding it. A cheap motel, a restless night, a child labeled difficult instead of in danger. There was no monster hiding in the shadows, just ordinary people making unforgivable choices one after another until there was no turning back. In the weeks that followed, the motel room was cleaned and rented again. New guests slept where the truth had been uncovered. Life moved forward, indifferent and fast. But for those who worked the case, the memory lingered. Because this wasn't a mystery about who did it. It was a reminder of how easily warning signs are dismissed, how silence becomes permission, and how the most devastating crimes don't always announce themselves with chaos. Sometimes they unfold quietly behind closed doors, while the world looks away. If this story left you shaken, stay with us. The next case goes even deeper into the darkness, and you won't want to miss it.